Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first ever episode of My Tech Story. Well, relatively the first episode because this is the trailer episode before the actual episode drop. But this episode is just aimed to give you a bit more context onto what this podcast is about, what to expect this season, and just the ins and out on why I even started this podcast in the first place. My name is Alice Kanjajo, your lovely host for this podcast, and I have had the absolute honor and pleasure to have some of the most amazing tech personalities on this podcast, and I just can't wait to share this with you guys. It's just a ball full of knowledge, a ball full of why am I saying ball, but it's just a podcast full of knowledge, a podcast full of motivation, inspiration, which is exactly what I wanted for this podcast. To get more in detail onto what MTS/My Tech Story is about, this podcast is basically a platform where I give the opportunity to many personalities that are in the tech industry or have a personal touch or have a certain story to share about their tech journey. By this, I mean whether they have experience, like for me, in marketing for a tech company, or whether it's going to be product, whether that's a founder who's building a product, whether that's different personalities that are in the data science industry, just basically a platform where people can come and share their insightful stories and just motivate other people who are looking to get into the tech industry, people who may even not have an interest into being the tech industry, but are interested to knowing about the tech solutions that are being built on a day-to-day basis. So that's in a nutshell what this podcast is about. But more than that, we are on a mission to scale African tech industry. By this, I mean, I felt that there was a gap in how we communicate the products that are being built every single day by Africans for Africans, or even not by Africans, but within the African space. There is a gap. I felt that there was a gap between those people and the consumers, everyday consumers, people like us, for example, who maybe can benefit from products that can help them in their everyday lives, but they just don't know about them, or they just don't even know about how technological solutions can help them in their day-to-day lives. So I wanted to create a space where we're having people learn more about not only the products that are available, but the inspiring stories about the people who are scaling in the African industry. I only say I felt that it was a gap because I work in marketing, and I've noticed the problems that marketers are potentially facing when it comes to getting their product out there. But more so, that's just one of the missions of this podcast. Honestly, what I would like to see this platform grow is into a tech hub where people are able to know what's happening within the tech industry, what's happening within the tech market, what's happening in terms of the solutions that are being built every day, and which ultimately gets more people to get more involved into the tech space, more adaptable to the solutions that are being built every day, and last but not least, ultimately grow the African economy by, having a platform that just shares what's happening in the African economy. That's general. I don't know what else to add into that. I think that's a general overview of what MTS is all about. Why did I start this podcast? I think I've also shared a lot of that actually with the explanation that I've given, but also I felt that on a personal level, I felt that it was also a next step into my personal journey and my personal career, because starting a podcast is one thing, but being able to be in the podcast industry for these 3 years, I've seen the power that podcasting also has. I've seen the power in which stories has as well and the impact that it has, more so linking that impact that podcasting space has to the impact that tech has, and just meshing it into one. So the MTS vision ultimately is to become one of the leading tech podcasts for your information that you get on the tech stuff that's happening in the tech industry, because I feel like there's so many spaces in the diaspora for such conversations to be held, but there is a lack of representation, or rather it's coming up, and this podcast is one of the come-ups where to have a space such as that. But also I want us to look at this podcast as a Pan-African podcast, in that this is not just a Kenyan podcast, although that is where I'm based. In this season, there's a lot to expect. I think we'll get more into that. This is a Nigerian podcast. This is a South African podcast. This is a Tanzanian podcast. This is a platform where I envision it being a place where it brings the African continent together and have this union of having the common goal of is ultimately growing our space and making it more tech savvy. I feel like Africa has so much potential that is still untapped, and why not? It's because of the communication channels that are there. Of course, there's other issues involved, but of course, my job is to create a space where people can hold those meaningful conversations and help people know about what's happening. I have always had a passion of communications, and I just felt this is the next step for me. And I'm just hoping that you are able to enjoy this entire season that we've filmed. We've worked too hard to film. And I really just hope that the message is home. I hope that you are inspired by the personalities that are going to come on this show. And I hope that this podcast just elevates you in one way or another. Speaking of which, Season 1 is now fully fleshed out. We have recorded all the personalities that we're going to be expecting on this season. And I started this by saying that I am in awe. I am feeling honored to have been a platform where these people said, hey, I'm going to come on and share my story onto this podcast, even without seeing the podcast come to life. I feel so appreciative that these people were able to believe in my vision and my mission and come onto this podcast without seeing any prior episodes being recorded or without any other kind of thing as a reference of what this podcast is going to turn out to be. And they absolutely killed it. The guests that we have this season absolutely brought my vision to life, and I couldn't be more happier with how it went. We have different representations in the podcast. Like I said, it's a Pan-African podcast and it's for Africans, but also it is for Africans, but it's also representative of people who are scaling in the African economy, whether or not they are African, but mostly, of course, it's going to be Africans represented. We have personalities who speak on their stories on how they went they went from uni and within uni getting jobs in one of the big boy tech companies like Safaricom here in Nairobi. We have a personality from Nigeria who shares his journey from going to Cyprus and then to Canada and then now scaling in Nairobi. We have someone who is, from the UK and then talks about their journey in Europe and then comes again to scale in Africa. We have a personality who comes out from being the everything man in his one little team to becoming one of the leading software engineers in such a big company here in Nairobi. So there's so many personalities to expect in this podcast. That's just the tip of a crumbs of what to expect. But honestly, guys, the conversations are beautiful. A special shout out to the production team, which is the person, Gideon Gadungu, who has been the videographer and editor / support system, honestly, for this whole vision coming to life. So I'm very thankful for you. He's behind the camera. So yeah, very thankful for him as well. And yes, without further ado, I think I can just end this in a sweet spot and just let you know that the podcast episode, the first one, is going to be my tech story. I felt it was only right for me to share my story first before I get into the different personalities. So very exciting. Coming out next week, and then from there on we continue with the reason why we came here in the first place, which is to hear other people's stories and hear how their journeys have been to get to where they are today. I hope you enjoyed this season thoroughly. I enjoyed filming it. I enjoyed producing it. I enjoyed, not producing it, that wasn't my part, but I enjoyed just bringing this idea to life, and I hope you do the same. Right now, what you can do to support the mission and vision is to just follow me on social media at My Tech Story Africa, or rather follow the brand. You can also follow my personals, link them in the description below, or if you're on YouTube, you can probably see them running on the screen right now. You can subscribe from wherever you're listening from. It's absolutely free. It costs you nothing to subscribe it, but what it will essentially lead to is essentially making this platform be heard by other people and share more insightful stories with other audiences, and just put the word out there that this podcast exists. So my name is Alice Kanjejo. I think I can end at that. And I can't wait to share my project with you. Your feedback would be highly appreciated. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that. And yeah, I hope you enjoy My Tech Story Africa. That's it. We can end the episode there. I'll see you next week. in the next episode. Bye-bye.